today, I would like to introduce the Director of Workforce and Economic Development for the County of Bucks, Billy Barnes. Thank you for joining us today, Billy.
Thank you for your introduction, Cameron. Good morning, everyone. I'm Billy Barnes, Executive Director of Workforce and Economic Development. On behalf of the Bucks County Workforce Development Board and the county, I want to welcome everyone to WED Talks. Today's discussion focuses on ways to create and retain commitment through partnership. Partnership is the new leadership, is the rallying cry for effective leadership in today's world. As our world continues to change at a fast pace, communication is light years from what it was. People purchase differently. Customer expectation is at an all-time high, and their tolerance is at an all-time low. It is time to open new doors, adopt new skills, and embrace innovation. To be successful, organizations must bridge the gap between old school mentalities and real world solutions that connect with team members at every level today. By joining our WED Talk today, you are ready to create transformation in your business, nurture deep connections with your people, and build trust through honest communication. Let's introduce our expert who will lead today's discussion. Back to you, Cameron.
Thanks, Billy. I am pleased to introduce our WED Talk presenter, Ty Bennett. Ty is the founder of Leadership, Inc., a speaking and training company with the mission to empower individuals and organizations to challenge their status quo, cultivate exceptional relationships, and compete in extraordinary ways. When Ty was 21 years old, he and his brother Scott started a business that they built to over $20 million in annual revenue while still in their 20s. Since then, he has developed over 500 sales managers globally with sales and leadership in 37 countries. Ty knows from firsthand experience what it takes to lead in today's world. Drawing on that knowledge from the trenches, Ty will provide us with tangible techniques to build commitment in your people and increase your impact as a leader. Please help me welcome business keynote speaker and leadership expert, Ty Bennett.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with all of you and excited to share some ideas and have a great conversation. I'm a huge fan of small businesses. As it was mentioned in my introduction, my background is as an entrepreneur myself. I have built and currently own businesses in multiple industries, and so I understand the ins and outs of what today's market feels like in terms of finding and retaining great people, in terms of building a team and a culture that is functionally effective. And this is what I do, or spend most of my time doing, is talking to organizations, groups of people, leaders in their own right, about how to lead effectively and some of the insights the research is showing us in terms of how we move the conversation forward. And so I hope that as you jump in today that you will actively take part. We're going to have a chance to have some questions and some interaction, especially at the end. We'll open it up for questions, but if you do have questions, you can put them in the question function on your toolbar there. You can type those in. We'll try and track those as we go through. As we start, I want to start actually asking you to engage in the question function here, because what led me to writing the book Partnership is the New Leadership was actually a question that I had. It was a survey that I conducted over about a 5-year period. And a survey is probably a generous word. I only used this one question that I'm going to ask you in a second. I asked this question to more than 5,000 leaders from multiple different industries, from every level within organizations. And to me, it was just an interesting perspective I was curious about. The question I have for you is, as a leader, what do you want from your people? I want you to think about that for a second. Think about the people that you lead. Think about the people on your team. What do you want from them? How would you answer that? If you can just type that into the questions area, give me some responses. First thing that comes to mind. Simple, doesn't have to be a huge, long, profound answer, just one word answer. What do you want from your people? I'll give it just a sec for that to kick in and for those answers to start coming. I think for all of us, from a leadership standpoint, as we start to think about our teams and what our expectations are, what we're looking for. Allison, thank you very much. You said respect. Absolutely. We want respect. We want them to we want them to have respect for us, and we want to give respect to them. Awesome. Commitment, honesty, Rachel, absolutely. I agree with that. Commitment and loyalty, dedication. Yeah, perfect. All of these things come to mind as I think about my team. We look for cohesion. I like that. It's not a word you hear often, but yeah, absolutely. We want to bring the team together. There's a sense of connectedness, cohesion. That's a great word. Truthfulness. Okay, absolutely. We need them to be forthright, to be honest, to give actual feedback, to share what's working, what's not working. Okay, all awesome answers. You know, as I conducted this survey, 76% of the leaders came back with one specific answer, and it's one that many of you used. They said what they want is commitment, right? When you think about commitment, commitment's kind of an all-encompassing word. Commitment, if they're committed, they're going to be dedicated, right? Those are synonyms. If they're committed, they're going to be truthful, they're going to be honest, they're going to be loyal, they're going to come together as a team, have that sense of cohesion. We want people to show up and be committed. We want them to give their absolute best. We want them to be engaged at a different level. And when that happens, we then take our organization to the next level. So I agree with that. I think about the people who work for me, the people I work with, and I want commitment out of them. My next question, though, is if I were to step back and to look at that, I looked at it and I said, okay, what drives commitment? Because if that's what I want, how do I create that? And the first thought was, well, people aren't committed to jobs. Did you know that statistically in this country, if you were to graduate from college this year, you'll hold over 30 jobs in your lifetime? It's kind of crazy when you think about it. It's an amazing amount of jobs. And so people aren't committed to jobs. And as great as the company or organization you work for is, unless you own it, you're probably not committed to that company or that organization. What drives commitment more than anything else is people are committed to people. I think as you hear that, we all kind of nod our heads. That resonates. I hope it does, because you think about it, the old adage would say that leadership was based on title, position, and authority, but I don't believe that that's true in today's world. I believe that partnership is the new leadership. Partnership is the new leadership. Have you ever heard the saying that people join companies, but they leave bosses? Statistically, that actually bears out. That's why most people leave. When you talk to people about why they're not happy or why they're not engaged, it's because the connection or lack of connection with their leader. I actually was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who's a speaker and an author as well in the leadership space, and he was on site working with an organization, and the leader who he talked to was basically bragging to him that he is not the kind of leader that cares about his people's feelings. He's not the kind of leader that is worried about connection. He's the kind of leader that gets results. This is how he's portraying himself to my friend, who is a leadership expert and a leadership speaker. The interesting thing, though, was later that day, my friend had 3 of his people say, I am currently looking for other employment. Right? You think about the lack of connection, what's driving that. I believe that partnership is the new leadership. Here's what I'm saying to you. I believe that the way you show up as a leader will directly impact the way that your people show up for you. Do you believe that's true? Do you think that you have influence in that regard? And 1, I hope you do, but 2, I also hope that throughout this conversation, I can show you how that influence works and give you some insights on how to increase that influence. Let me give you an idea of what I mean when I say partnership is the new leadership. I'll give you an experience or an example that played out on a national scale, but actually comes from pretty close to where you are based. And so some of you might recognize this. A couple of years ago on the national news, there was a really interesting story that started to take place. 2 cousins began feuding over a family business. Now, if you've ever been involved in family business, that's not really newsworthy. My background, I built a business with my brother. That was the first business that I owned. About 12 years ago, I sold him my half of the business, and now we have an amazing relationship. It's kind of interesting how that works out sometimes in family business, right? So in this instance, what happened was this gentleman that you see on your screen, I'm not sure what happened with my slide there. So What happened in this instance was interesting. There were two gentlemen. Arthur T. DeMullis, as he was known to his people. Arthur T. was at the time the CEO and the minority owner of a 71-store grocery store chain based in Massachusetts called Market Basket. Now, some of you are probably familiar with Market Basket, know the name at least. Arthur T., as the minority owner, he technically owned 49.5% of the company. His cousin was the majority owner. His cousin was named Arthur S. DeMullis. Now, I know this is confusing. You have Arthur T., you have Arthur S. The company was started by their great-grandfather. I'm sure you can't guess what his name was. It was Arthur as well. Arthur S. technically owned 50.5% of the company. He was the chairman of the board. He was the majority owner. And these two cousins have very different leadership styles. They had different approaches. They feuded over this for years. They didn't see eye to eye in terms of, it's okay, just pop it back up, in terms of how they ran the company and the things that they were doing within the company. Sorry, okay. So Arthur T. On the left, the balding gentleman, it got to the point where Arthur S., as the chairman of the board, as the majority owner, he forced the board's hand and they pushed his cousin out as CEO. They fired him. They let him go. And what happened after that to me was amazing. Some of you might remember this, but 20,000 employees of Market Basket and thousands of customers walked out and they went on strike in support of Arthur T. And it wasn't just that they walked out and then went on strike. They literally stopped shipments from coming into the stores. They brought the company to a screeching halt. And if you saw footage of this, they would show these stores and the shelves were empty and the store was vacant and it was bizarre. And my question is, what would cause 20,000 employees to risk everything in support of their leader? Well, the answer is that Arthur T. understood things that Arthur S. didn't. You see, Arthur S. believed that people were loyal to companies, but look at the picket signs for a minute. They weren't there for Market Basket. They were there for Arthur T. That's where their loyalty lied. Arthur T. had a connection with his people. What I found fascinating is every time they interviewed somebody on the picket line, they would ask him about Arthur T. They'd ask him about their CEO, and what those people would share were personal experiences. I remember one lady said, I remember one time he just walked me out to my car and just asked me questions, got to know me. One guy's talked about how every once in a while they'd come in the morning and he'd be there greeting them as they came in and say, thank you for coming. Thank you for being part of the Market Basket family. Ultimately, he knew them and they knew him and they loved him for it. Well, long story short, about a month into the strike, Arthur T. successfully negotiated buying out his cousin Arthur S. He became the sole owner of Market Basket. He reinstated himself as CEO, and the company is back on track and doing better than ever. In fact, since that took place, they have grown by almost $1 billion in revenue since that took place. That is the kind of leadership that works in today's world. It is partnership-based leadership. So I want you to think about that for a second. Partnership-based leadership. What do I mean when I say that? Well, let's just start from like a high level and work our way down. First off, partnership-based leadership is the way you view your people. Think about it. If you view your people as partners, that feels very different than if you view them as subordinates, doesn't it? I think partnership-based leadership is built on genuine relationships. We're going to dive into this deeper, but I'll share my favorite leadership quote of all time. It comes from John Maxwell. He said, "You can love people without leading them, but you cannot lead people without loving them." I just don't think it works. I think partnership-based leadership is driven by passion. I think sometimes as leaders, we want our people to be passionate, but we need to recognize that that passion starts with us, because a leader that lacks passion will have followers that lack commitment. And so you have to show up that way. I think partnership-based leadership creates a natural accountability, right? Where you can count on them and they're engaged and committed, but they also can count on you, and you follow through and do what you said you're going to do the way you said you're going to do it, right? There's a transparency there. Ultimately, what this type of leadership creates is it creates transformation. And why do I say that? Because if you think about our world today, think about your business, think about your competitors. The reality is most people can do what you do in your space. Our world is, organizations are not separated anymore by super unique proprietary technology or unique products or services that no one else can duplicate. And so if that's the case and everybody is good, what's the great differentiator? I would propose that the commitment level of your people, the way you show up, the energy, the engagement, the customer experience that you create, the speed of service, that's what differentiates us today. And so as leaders, can we lead in a way that enables, that empowers, that inspires the commitment level of our people so that we take our organization to another level? And I think that we can. This is not a clever phrase that I came up with to sell books. It is the actual approach of the most relevant, the most influential, the most successful speakers, the leaders in today's world, is they lead from a partnership perspective. And there's some things that they do differently, some things that I want to share with you and give you some insight. And to me, this is where it starts. Foundationally, I believe that partner leaders build genuine relationships. I say foundationally because I get a chance to work with leaders in all sorts of different organizations, different industries. And even on this webinar today, we have people representing different industries, people involved in different types of business. And the commonality that we all share is that we're actually all in the same business. We're in the people business. Aren't we? We're in the people business. Think about it, as leaders, we're in the people business. Every day you engage with, work with, lead, inspire, network with, hopefully impact people. And if we're in the people business, then relationships are the currency of that business. And so for just a second, I want you to think about the people on your team. Individually, just kind of scroll through those people in your mind. And on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate those relationships? Do you feel connected with them? Do you know them? Do they know you? Is there trust? Is there cohesion, to steal that word? Is there a sense of commitment coming from them? Do they feel like you have their back? Is there friction? Is there some things that haven't gone well lately, and therefore there's kind of a break in that connection and relationship, right? Think through those people for just a minute. And here's the reality. We could spend most of the day talking about strategies on how to build better connection, how to build a deeper relationship and genuine relationships with those people. But I want to share one specific strategy with you. I want to give you an idea of something you can do starting today, finishing this webinar, that is going to make an impact in how you connect with your people. This might seem simple, but I want you to begin to invest in people. Invest in your people. Now, when I say that, I don't know what comes to mind for you, but I'll tell you where this came from for me. When I was in high school, I got involved in a business program that's called DECA. I don't know if you're familiar with DECA or not. I grew up in Colorado. DECA was a big program in Colorado, but it's a great program for high school and college students where kids from all around the country compete in business competitions, first at the district level, then at state, and eventually at nationals. And there's lots of categories you can choose to compete in. There's things like quick serve restaurant or hotel management, sports and entertainment marketing. There's lots of different categories. I chose to compete in the entrepreneurship category, which meant that I had to conceive of a business, and I wrote out a business plan, and then I presented it to judges who are acting as venture capitalists, trying to convince them to invest in my business. So this was like the non-TV version of Shark Tank, if you guys have seen that show. I grew up in Colorado. I went to the district competition in the area where I lived. I competed, and I ended up winning the district competition, which qualified me for the state competition, which that year was held at the Broadmoor Resort in Colorado Springs. Cool place, fun experience. We went, we competed. It was amazing. And I ended up winning the state competition, which qualified me for the national competition, which I was excited about. If I'm being honest, I was probably excited for 2 reasons. I was a senior in high school and I got to go on a trip. That was kind of fun in and of itself. And every year they held the national competition in some exotic location. Like the year before, it was held in Orlando, Florida. And the year before that, it was held in San Diego, California. And I was excited because it was always some exotic place. And the year that I qualified, they held the national competition in the exotic location of Louisville, Kentucky. Now, I can laugh about it now, but that was kind of disappointing at the time. But regardless, that's why we went. We went to Louisville. We had a great time. We had a great experience. Overall, there were about 10,000 kids that competed in the entrepreneurship category, but nationals was down to the top 100. They took the top 2 from every state. And so we went and we competed. In the first round, they cut the top 100 down to the top 50. I presented to the judges. We went through that process, and I made it through the first round. So we go and present to the judges in the second round. They take the top 50 down to the top 15, the finalists. They called you out name by name. And I don't know if it was random or if I just squeaked in. I was literally the 15th name called. And so we go and present to the judges one final time. Now, I don't know if you've ever had the experience of giving the same presentation over and over and over again. I had given this presentation so many times. I'd given the mirror to my friends, to my teachers, at districts, at state, at national. Like, I was so sick of this presentation. But I'm telling you, if there has ever been a perfect presentation, this final one was it. It was so good. The judges were engaged. They asked great questions. My responses just flowed. They even laughed at my jokes, even though they weren't funny. You guys kind of get that right now. And I finished and I thought, I just won. Out of 10,000 kids. I just knocked this out of the park. Well, I didn't win. I took second place. And I'm sure the girl in first place cheated, and I still can't prove it still to today, which, just so you know, that girl to the right of me, cheater right there. She's the one who won. You know what's interesting about that experience is I don't actually remember that. I don't have any specific memory of standing on stage when that took place. But what I do remember, and I remember it like it was yesterday, is what happened after that final presentation. I'm across the table from these three judges, and as I'm gathering up my things, the head judge, who's a prominent businessman in Louisville, he walks around the table with his business card in hand, and he hands it to me, and he goes, Ty, that was really impressive. He goes, I want you to call me because I want to invest in you. Now, I was flattered, but as an 18-year-old kid, I kind of laughed, and I went, oh, shoot. I hope this doesn't affect my score, but I don't know if I'm actually going to start this business. This is just a competition. I don't know if I'm going to do it. And then he said something that I don't think I understood at the time. He said, that's okay. He said, I've found that I get my highest return on investment when I invest in people, and I want to invest in you. You know, at the time, as an 18-year-old, when I heard the word invest, the only thing that came to mind for me was money. But the more I've thought about it, I don't think that's what he meant, because when you invest in people, what do you invest? You invest time, you invest care, you invest understanding, you invest yourself. Investments in people are probably not in your job description, but they're those types of investments that change the nature of relationships. As I'm saying that, I'll bet every single person can think of somebody who's invested in them. You can think of somebody, right? A boss, a friend, a neighbor, a teacher, a coworker, somebody. Here's my question. If that person called you today and they said, I need your help, would you not move heaven and earth to help them? You see, I would call that influence, because that's what happens. When you invest in people, you grow your influence. And so as leaders who want to get commitment from their people, I don't think investments in people are just a good idea. I think they are a necessary daily activity. And when I say that, I don't want you to think about, I've got to do these huge things, I've got to do these expensive things. Sometimes they're very simple, but they're intentional. I'll give you a cool experience. I'll give you an example. In 2003, on the Good Morning America show, Charlie Gibson was interviewing General Earl Helston, who at the time was the acting general of the United States Marine Corps. And stationed just outside, he and his troops were stationed just outside of Iraq. They're waiting for orders to go to war. And the interview was pretty typical, things you'd probably ask, like, you know, what's the morale of the troops? What's the situation in Baghdad? Normal questions. Towards the end of the interview, Charlie asked what I thought was a weird question. He said, General, do you have any hobbies? Do you have anything that you like to do outside of your profession? And the general didn't skip a beat. He goes, you know what I do? I love photography. I love to take pictures. And it's interesting you ask that question, because we've been here kind of in a holding pattern for about a week or so. And so I've been going out every day and I take pictures of my men. And I come back to my tent at night and I email those pictures along with a note back home to their mothers. And Charlie goes, are you serious? That's amazing. Like, I'm fascinated though. What do you say in a note like that? Like, what do you write to them? And he said, I don't know, I hadn't thought about it. So he grabbed his laptop, he pulled it open, he pulled up the last email he had sent, and this is what it said. It said, Dear Mrs. Johnson, I thought you might enjoy seeing this picture of your son. He's doing great. I want you to know that you did a wonderful job of raising him, and I'm certainly honored to serve with him in the United States Marine Corps. Signed, General Earl Hailston. Now here's the truth. I've never read the job description of Marine Corps General before, but I don't think that's in there. I don't think there's a clause that says, hey, you know, it'd be great when you're at war. I think General Hailston is the kind of leader that invested in his people. And here's the only relevant question in my mind to that. If we were to step back and look at that situation, do you think General Hailston's troops were compliant or committed? I think they'd follow that man to the ends of the earth. And yes, I get that they're Marines. I get that they'll fall in line, but you and I both know that compliance will never take you where commitment can go. What we want is commitment out of our people. And what I am telling you is that when you invest in people, what do people do? They invest in you. It's reciprocal. It's actually how we're wired as human beings. The law of reciprocity, you've probably heard of it before. The law of reciprocity, we want to reciprocate things. If somebody does something nice, you want to do something nice back. If somebody punches you in the face, you want to punch them back, right? I'll give you an example. How many of you have ever received a birthday present from somebody you didn't really know? Weren't you like, ah, crap? Right? When's your birthday? Because you feel obligated. Now you have to get them a birthday present now too. One of my favorite studies ever, this social scientist, Robert Cialdini, he's studying the law of reciprocity and he wants to measure it. He wants to put numbers to it, right? So he had this funny idea. It was November. He pulled open the phone book. He chose just 80 random people out of the phone book, 80 total strangers. He sent them Christmas cards, just 80 random Christmas cards. Guess how many people out of 80 sent Christmas cards back to a total stranger? 62. 62 people sent Christmas cards back to a guy they don't even know. I can only imagine they're sitting there going, is this your cousin? Is this my cousin? I don't know. We sent us one, so we better send him one, right? That's how it works. So guess what? When you invest in people, people want to invest in you. And I remember learning that lesson from as an 18-year-old kid from that judge. And for me, as a young entrepreneur, trying to get people to take me seriously, I reached out and tried to invest in other people. And as I've grown my teams, making a conscious effort to invest in my people, to go above and beyond, to do those little things, very simple things. I'll give you a very simple example. I own a retail business here in the state of Utah. I was out of town last Thursday giving a speech, and one of the people going to work for me texted me and said, there's a crazy amount of traffic. I don't know what is going on, but I'm going to be late. I'm just letting you know. What happened is on the main freeway here, right by my home, there was an oil tanker that crashed and spilled 15 tons of oil all over the freeway. They shut it down for nearly the entire day. So they're rerouting everybody, and it was just a total mess. It took him what should take 20 minutes to get to work. It took him 3.5 hours. Now, we weren't open at that time, and so that wasn't ideal, but we couldn't do anything about it. I'm out of state. He's doing his best to get there. By the time he got there, now this is somebody who, you know, is just an hourly employee for me. By the time he got there, he let me know that he got there, and when he got there, it was literally like 3 hours later. I texted him and said, hey, grab a $20 bill out of the cash register to help cover gas. That's a very simple thing, but for him, it was huge. He's brought it up 3 times since then. Now, that was just like, you just spent 3.5 hours trying to get to work to support our business. Like, it makes sense to me. It's not that big of a deal, but those little investments pay off, right? They do create loyalty. They create connection. They create cohesion. They make a difference. I'll share with you my favorite story I've ever heard from a leader. I was speaking for Delta Airlines in Atlanta. That's where they're headquartered. They brought in all of their managers from all the airports all around the world. There are about 3,000 people at this event, and I spoke sharing some of these ideas that I'm sharing today. And at the end of it, I was doing a book signing at the back of the room. And as I was signing books, this gentleman stopped and asked me to sign his book. And he said, Ty, can I share a story about one of the people I've invested in on my team? And I said, absolutely. And he said, my job is I'm a below wing manager. I said, tell me what that means. He said, my team's in charge of everything below the wing, baggage, food, anything that comes in below the wing, that's what we do. I said, okay, great. He said, I get to work every day about 5 in the morning, and the first shift I go out and I throw bags with my guys. I already like this guy, right? Like, just engaged, like the kind of leader that jumps in. He said, then I've got other responsibilities, but I want to start the day right with my team, and then I go work in my office and do the things I have to do. He said, there's this guy on my team named Tony. And Tony is way too chipper at 5 in the morning, like annoyingly so. He's just all excited and bubbly, and we're barely waking up. And he's like, come on, guys. And we're like, shut up, Tony. Like, you love him for it, right? But that's who Tony is. He said, there's this one morning I'm out there and something's off. Tony's not himself. And so he looked over and he's like, Tony, are you okay? And Tony goes, I'll be fine. Don't worry about it. He reached out again. He goes, Tony, what's going on? He goes, don't worry about it. So this manager said he went back to his office, but he couldn't get Tony out of his mind. And so right before lunch, he called him into his office, and Tony came in. He said, Tony, what's up? And he said, I told you, don't worry about it. And he goes, I am worried about it. You know, obviously you don't have to talk to me, but I just want you to know that I'm here if you need somebody to talk to. And Tony goes, you really want to hear what's going on? And he goes, yeah, I care about you. And so Tony sat down and he explained that the night before, he and his wife found out they couldn't have kids. He told them about this whole process of years of trying and doctor's appointments and tests and just everything that they've been going through, and just the heartache that's involved in that, how sad his wife was, how devastated he was, how he was sad for her, just the whole process. Somewhere in that process, this manager goes, Tony, I'm so sorry. What can I do? I want to help you. And Tony goes, that's the problem. You can't fix this. There's nothing you can do. And he got up and he left. And this manager looked at me and goes, Ty, I had to do something. So during lunch, he put together a packet of information on Lutheran adoption services. It's the only thing that came to mind for him. After lunch, he went and gave it to Tony. He said, Tony, look, I don't have an agenda here. I want you to know that I care, and this is the only thing I could think of to do. I don't know if this is helpful, but just know that I'm here for you. Tony took the packet and they never talked about it. This manager said about a month later, Tony went back to his annoying chipper self at 5 in the morning. And about a year later, this manager's in his office. There's a knock at the door and Tony's standing there. He goes, can I come in? He said, sure. And he walked in and Tony put a picture of a little boy on his desk. And he said, I want you to be this boy's godfather. And I'm at the back of this ballroom with 3,000 people and I'm crying and this guy's crying, and this guy looked at me with tears in his eyes and he said, Ty, when you invest in people, they become family. And here's a question for you to think about. For many of you who own or run small businesses or part of it, does that group feel like family? Does that connection exist? Is that sense of loyalty, cohesion, is that there? I want to challenge each of you to begin to invest in your people. It doesn't have to be big things, it could be simple things, but when you invest in them, I'm going to promise you they're going to show up differently because it becomes reciprocal. Now, let's talk about some other things that partner leaders do differently. It's interesting, Denise, in the chat, you said the thing that you want from your people is buy-in. Let's talk about it. Partner leaders generate buy-in. I agree, we all want buy-in. We want our people to buy into the initiatives, to the goals, to the direction we're moving. How do we do that, right? Ultimately, I think when we think about buy-in, we think about just selling the idea and being powerful and persuasive, and there's an element of that, but I want you to think about something that maybe you haven't thought about when it comes to buy-in. I'll couch this in kind of an experience I observed. I am, as a professional speaker, this is what I do full-time, it's what I've done for 12 plus years. I'm involved in an association called the National Speakers Association. Aptly named, this is for people who do what I do. NSA was started in 1972 by a man named Cavett Robert. It's kind of an interesting story. Cavett actually He had this idea one day. He invited 5 speaker friends over to his house, and he didn't really explain why, but they sat down. He sat him at the kitchen table. He pulled out an apple pie and he started cutting slices. And finally, somebody said, "Cavett, what are we doing?" And he said, "You know, I'm glad you asked that, because for me, I see the speaking industry as this apple pie." He said, "What I mean is it feels like every year we keep dividing up the same pie. Like one year you get a bigger slice, and the next year you get a bigger slice, and maybe next year I'll get a bigger slice, but it just feels like the exact same pie." And he said, "I wonder if there's a way we could come together and we could actually build a bigger pie." That was the founding meeting of the National Speakers Association, 6 people sitting around a kitchen table. Fast forward to today, there's about 3,000 members of the National Speakers Association. We have a convention every year. Imagine that conference just for a second, right? Try and get a word in edgewise there. Like, this is the most eclectic group of people you'll ever meet in your life. Some of my very best friends. And I'm pretty involved in the association. I was the president of the Utah chapter where I live. I'm on a national committee. I'm pretty engaged. So a couple of years ago, we're in San Diego, California at our convention. Everything's going great. You get to the final day, final general session, and there's whisperings that there's going to be some big announcement. Now, I didn't know what it was. I had no idea. So I was intrigued. I go in and they give this incredible presentation. One of the founding members, Cavett Robert, the founder, is no longer with us. He's passed away. So one of the founding members gets up and tells the story of the apple pie. Talks about the initial vision, how they would have never imagined this is what it would turn into. Then they bring up a past president from the 70s, from the 80s, from the 90s, from the 2000s up to today, that I'll talk about the evolution and the process, the building of the speaking industry. Then they bring up the branding expert for Fox Business News, who happens to be a speaker on branding, and he talks about the brand of NSA and all this research they've done and how we stay relevant. Then they introduce that they're going to change the name of the National Speakers Association. It's no longer going to be known as NSA, it's now going to be known as Platform. They talk about kind of the rollout of this, and then the meeting is adjourned. Everybody walks out in the hallway, and all the signage in the hallways change. Platform, platform, platform everywhere. And then people get on social media, and it is like a revolution. They hate it. I mean, threads that are reading like Cavett Roberts rolling over in his grave. What are they thinking? That I quit, like major backlash. So a friend of mine named Shep Hyken had been put in as national president that morning. Like put in as president, they changed the name. Everybody hates his guts. Like, this is presidency so far. So he sends out a video and he says, "Look, if you have thoughts on this, please email me. Here's my email. I will read them." Over the weekend, he gets 842 emails, all negative. People do not like this. And so he sends out another video on Monday. He says, "We're going to take a step back. We're going to put together a membership-driven committee to reassess this decision. If you'd like to be part, please volunteer." 90 people volunteer. They show them all the research. They go through it for about a month or so. And in the end, they decide Platform is dead. We will continue to be the National Speakers Association. Now, as that whole thing unfolded, I didn't really engage in the conversation. I just watched. I was really curious. And my question really was, why didn't it work? And my first thought was, it's the name, right? Platform, that's a dumb name. What does that even mean? Are we a platform? Do we stand on it? Like, it's just kind of clunky. It doesn't sound right. But I don't know, NSA's already confusing. Are we the NSA that speaks to you or the NSA that listens to you? The research showed that the name change actually made sense. You know what I think they missed? And I think it's something that too many leaders in today's world miss. They miss the idea that people support what they help create. I want you to really hear that. People support what they help create. You see, sitting in that room of 3,000 speakers, there are about 12 that are on the national board that were the only ones who were part of that conversation or even knew it was taking place. Everyone else felt very blindsided when this was introduced. And for just a minute, go back with me, like 20 plus years before social media, our psyche has changed because of social media. This idea, people support what they help create, always existed, but we used to at least accept, if not believe, that if you didn't hold a position of leadership, you probably didn't have a say. Well, social media has given us all a voice, and therefore we think we have a voice. And as stupid as this sounds to you, if you hire an 18-year-old intern today, he thinks he has a say tomorrow, and you can go, "Ty, that's really dumb. Here's the problem." We want commitment out of our people. And what I am telling you is that commitment in today's world does not happen at the point of implementation. It happens at the point of creation. And so the pushback I get is, okay, Ty, but I can't involve every person in my organization in every decision. That's just not feasible. And that's not what I'm saying. But I am going to ask you a question that I think you need to consider. Do your people feel heard? Do they feel like they have a voice? Because if they don't, I can promise you, you are not getting their full commitment. And in many instances, if people don't feel like they have a voice, they are currently looking for other employment. They're currently looking for other opportunities where they feel valued. People support what they help create. That's how you generate buy-in. Let me give you one more idea. Partner leaders know that motivation is important, but it's overrated. It's an interesting phrase, right? Motivation is important, but it's overrated. Here's what I mean by that. If we were to have a goal, set any kind of goal, this X is on the screen is the target. That's the goal, right? You've got goals, especially as we come into the new year. You're going to have personal goals, professional goals, organizational goals. In this conversation, we established a goal, and that is commitment out of our people. When you have any goal, there's two factors you need to consider. On one side, there's motivators that drive you towards your goal, the why, right? What's compelling. On the other side, there's obstacles or inhibitors that keep you from achieving your goal. And my question to you is, which side's more important? Now, as you think about that, let me give you a very simple story. I have 5 kids. I'm from Utah. And my son Drew, a couple years ago, if you were sitting in my kitchen with me, the refrigerator's kind of back over here to my right. I'm on my phone, I'm replying to a text or an email. My 8-year-old son Drew is behind me and he says, "Dad, can you open the fridge?" Now he's 8 years old. He's very capable of opening the fridge. And so I didn't really even look up and I said, "Drew, you can open the fridge." And then I hear Drew behind me almost crying and he goes, "Dad, can you open the fridge?" And I turn and I look and he is standing there holding 6 Matchbox cars in his hands. Now, as his leader, I have 2 options. I could motivate him. "Drew, you could do it, buddy, try harder." Or I could remove the inhibitors and help him do his job. I said, "Drew, put the Matchbox cars down." He put them down. I said, "Now open the fridge." And he's like, "Oh my gosh," like he's never done this before. That is a very simple story, but I also think it proves the point. I think as leaders, we spend way too much time on the motivating side of the equation. The reason we do, honestly, is I think it's easier. I think if we think about leadership as motivational cheerleading, then all we have to do is say, "Go and run." The problem is if they go and run and there's a wall, then they hit the wall. And then we go, "Okay, get up, like run faster this time, like lead with your head." No, our job is to actually help them remove the wall, to clear the runway, to open up those opportunities, to equip them with the skills, the knowledge, the technical requirements for them to be able to do their job well. And here's what it requires from us as leaders is we actually have to get in the trenches and understand what's stopping them. Because sometimes there's things that organizationally are, systemic sticking points, but more often than not, leadership is individual, it's not collective. And so we need to understand individually what is it that are those inhibitors for that person and spend some time there. Because think about it, what's motivating? More than anything else, showing up and feeling like you're winning, feeling like you're crushing it, feeling like you know how to get the job done well. When you show up to a job and you feel like you're beating your head against the wall every single day, there's nothing motivating about that. But if I can equip my people and show them how to win, if I can show them how to run, if I can clear the runway and allow them to truly succeed, then man, they're going to show up and crush it every single day. Can you start to see how partnership is the new leadership? How your approach to leadership could and does impact your people and the way that they show up for you? When you partner with your people, you understand the importance of that relationship, and therefore you invest into it. When you invest in that relationship, I promise you, people are going to invest in you. Find ways to invest in them, to add value every single day. Allow your people to feel heard, give them a voice, because people support what they help create. And ultimately get in the trenches and understand if you can remove those inhibitors, people are going to run, and then that motivation becomes effective, then it becomes needed, then they need that attaboy, attagirl. But if we can get in and understand how to clear the runway for our people, they can be truly, truly effective. I believe that partnership is new leadership. I believe that you can directly impact the way that your people show up. And my hope out of this is that you grab onto at least one idea and say, you know what, I can take this back. I can tweak the way that I lead in this one specific way. So for just a second, I want you to give that some thought. What is that for you? What's the takeaway? What's the thing that you're going to implement? Because here's what happens is we spend an hour talking about some of these things, and maybe this was entertaining, maybe this was fun, maybe this was just a break from your day, and that's all great. But my hope is that it actually changes something, and for that to happen, you have to change. For that to happen, you need to be able to put something in place. And so what is that for you? Are there key people on your team you can begin investing into? And what does that look like? Is there a way to bring your team into it, give them a voice? Are there areas in which there's inhibitors that are stopping growth and progress, and you need to jump in the trenches and start to figure out what that is? Like, there's some key ideas that hopefully you can grab onto and start to implement into what you do. Now, in the last couple of minutes, I'd love to answer any questions that you have. And so if you have specific questions, if you go underneath the questions tab in your toolbar, you can type those in. Deanna, I think I'm going to bring you back into this to help facilitate some of that. I'd love to have you be part of diving into any questions that we get. Can you scroll down on that? Yeah. Sure. So Deanna, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
As we wait for questions for a minute. What's one idea from this that stood out to you that you go, okay, you know what, I can use that. I can put that in play in my leadership and my interactions.
Let me think about that for a minute.
I know you were supposed to facilitate, and I'm throwing them at you.
Yeah. Right. Let me think. What resonated with me, one thing was the question you posed: are your employees being heard? And I did think about that a lot. I'm a manager actually for proposal team, and that made me think, you know, if they don't feel like they're being heard, then they're looking elsewhere, right, for a job or something else. And so I really have to kind of put that in perspective and make sure they're feeling like part of the team all the time.
I like it. Cool. That's great. Yeah, and that's when I think, you know, as leaders, we need to constantly self-assess and get feedback on that, right? And be able to have those open, real conversations with our people so we know where they're at. And sometimes that happens through surveys or other things, but, you know, that kind of 360 assessment of how that comes across and how people are feeling, that feedback's vitally important.
Absolutely. I don't see anything in the questions feature yet. Oh, here we go. Do you believe, in your experience and in conjunction with the partnership and leadership concept, that, quote, a people first mentality wins the day, so to speak?
I do believe in putting people first. Now, obviously, there's a constant balance between putting people first and the results of what we need to get to, right? But I think that balance comes into play when putting people first doesn't mean that we disregard anything else. It doesn't mean that we throw away any actual progress or work towards getting the results that we need. I think putting people first just simply means that we value people, that we show up in a caring, giving partner kind of way, that we can recognize those times when we do need to slow down to put somebody ahead of somebody else, or ahead of a process or procedure that needs to happen. We do recognize those times when we need to really give into those people and invest a little bit more. I do believe in a people first mentality. One of the companies that I've worked with is a restaurant chain out of Florida called First Watch. They are a breakfast and brunch and lunch concept. They're not open for dinner. And the CEO for a very long time is somebody that I actually feature in the book Partnership is a New Leadership. And they're, if you look at their core values, the first one is people first. And how does that show up? It shows up in terms of the amount of time that they spend. It shows up in where they invest from an organizational standpoint in investing into their people. It shows up in how they interact, and it starts from the top. The CEO, the only thing I've ever heard negative about him was from his assistant, who said sometimes getting him out of the restaurants with our people and into the office to get the things done he needs to is hard, right? That was literally it. But that was his mentality, and people loved him for it. The most beloved CEO I've ever come across is because he put people first. He lived that value, and that came across in their customer service. I've been in many of their restaurants. It came across in the experience that they created because, you know, they're a very people-centric business. So long rambling answer, but yes, I do. I think there's always a balance in getting done what we need to get done, but I don't think we ever go wrong in putting people first or placing value on the people, especially those that are on our team, those that are closest to us.
Great.
Josh, thank you for that question. I appreciate it.
I don't see any other questions right now.
All right. Well, please join us for the next WED Talk on Wednesday, January 11th. This WED Talk is an economic development information session focused on connecting Bucks County businesses with the assistance, resources, and services to thrive in a post-COVID landscape. Executive leadership from the Bucks County Economic Development Corporation, Industrial Development Authority, Pennsylvania Career Link, Redevelopment Authority, and Visit Bucks County will lend their expertise. Look for a registration link coming soon on the calendar of events page at www.buckscountygov/PA Career Link. Thanks everyone and have a great day.
Ty, did you have any closing comments?
Thank you so much for everybody joining, spending some time. I think, you know, just any time you can spend an hour thinking about how do I do this more effectively? How do I lead more effectively? To me, that's a leadership mentality, having that learner's mindset, having the approach of humility to say, okay, how can I get better? What can I learn from this? And hopefully that carries over to application and putting it in play. I love that as an organization, you provide this service, you provide this kind of learning atmosphere. And as we wrap up the end of the year, I hope that everybody takes that mentality of, okay, you know what, let's finish out this year strong, but let's make plans, let's make goals, and let's make 2023 the best year it can be. And I wish you guys the very best of luck in that. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Ty.